Welcome to Revisit Books podcast, where we turn books into bite-sized wisdom you can use every day. If you've spent any time, studying corporate strategy or disruption theory,
Oh, for sure.
then you absolutely know the name Clayton M. Christensen.
He was a giant in the field.
Right. I mean, he wasn't just some influential academic. This is the guy who gave us The Innovator's Dilemma.
A book that really, it changed everything. It fundamentally shifted how CEOs, how investors, how everyone thought about competition,
Yeah.
about corporate failure even.
Exactly. But now, imagine taking that brilliant mind, that same intense focus on causality in billion-dollar companies, and turning it inward. And that is the perfect setup for the book we're talking about today. How will you measure your life? He wrote it with James Allworth and Karen Dillon, and it's such a profound idea.
It really is, because it doesn't just offer, opinions or feel-good advice. It takes these very robust, proven management frameworks.
The same ones you'd use to analyze GE or Intel.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it applies them directly to life's biggest personal questions. How do you find real happiness in your career? How do you build relationships that last? And maybe most importantly, how do you live a life of integrity?
And I think what makes it so powerful is where it came from, the origin story of it all. The book literally grew out of his final class at Harvard Business School, a very reflective lecture he would give.
Yeah, and he would often start that class by looking at his own classmates years after they graduated.
And you have to think about who these people were.
Right. I mean, this is Harvard Business School. We're talking about the best and the brightest. People who went on to Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, started their own huge companies.
By any external metric, the job title, the salary, the status, they were absolutely winning. Their career plans had worked.
They had. But then Christensen would look at the personal data a decade or two later.
And what he saw was just wreckage, a shocking amount of personal wreckage, especially among those top achievers.
So many divorces, deep unhappiness that was just, papered over by career success. And then there were the ones who had faced total ethical collapse.
Ended up in jail, even.
Exactly. And the core issue, he realized, wasn't that they had bad intentions. Everyone intends to have a great family and be a good person.
Of course, that's the goal.
The problem was they didn't have a sound theory to guide their decisions. So the mission of this book is to give people those tools to prevent that same kind of derailment.
And that's the core concept right there, this difference between correlation and causality. You said they offer theories, not just quick fixes. Why is that so important?
Always everything. Christensen was always hammering this point home, trying to be happy by just copying what successful people do. That's just looking at correlation.
It's like seeing that birds have feathers and then thinking, okay, to fly, I just need to strap feathers to my arm.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. The breakthrough in flight only came when Daniel Bernoulli gave us the theory, the principle of lift. He explained the causality.
And once you understand the cause, you can reliably get the effect.
You can make it predictable. And that's what these business frameworks do for your life. If you follow the rules of causality that these theories lay out, your results become far, far more predictable.
So let's talk about who this is really for. We're sort of aiming this discussion at the learner, someone who wants to get up to speed quickly, but also deeply.
Yeah, and this work speaks so directly to that high-achieving person who's really wrestling with that classic dilemma, the constant tug-of-war between career success and just, personal fulfillment.
If you've ever felt like you had to compromise, like you chose the short-term win, the bonus, the promotion, over something that felt more meaningful long-term,
then these ideas are absolutely for you right now.
it also feels critically important for new parents or maybe young professionals just starting out, especially those who have this really dangerous belief that you can sequence your life.
Oh, that is such a dangerous idea.
The whole, I'm going to go all in on my career for 10 years, make my money, and then I'll focus on my family.
And the theories we're about to get into show exactly why that's so often a fatal mistake. You can't put off the most important investments.
And finally, I think if you're just someone looking for a clear way to check in with yourself, to see if how you're actually spending your time and energy lines up with what you say your goals are.
This gives you the framework. It's a way to check your trajectory before you get too far down a path you might regret. Okay, so let's get into the first big takeaway. This one is all about careers, and it really challenges this idea that money and status are what bring you happiness at work, we're calling it, getting motivation right, the trap of hygiene factors. And this comes straight from the work of Frederick Herzberg and his two-factor theory. He was trying to figure out what really motivates people at work, and what he found was, it was revolutionary.
Because he split things into two different categories, right?
Right.
Exactly. Two distinct types of factors, hygiene factors and motivators. Okay, let's start with hygiene factors. What are those and what do they do?
So hygiene factors are all the things around the job. Think salary, job security, the working conditions, the status of the company, even your manager's style.
The context of the work, not the work itself.
Perfectly put. And what Hertzberg found was that if these things are bad, they make you profoundly dissatisfied. They make you unhappy.
So if my salary is terrible and my boss is a nightmare, I'm miserable. Makes sense.
Right. But here's the insight, the piece of causality that changes everything, improving those hygiene factors. It doesn't make you satisfied.
Wait, say that again? A better salary doesn't make you satisfied. It only stops you from being dissatisfied. It prevents unhappiness. Think of it like this. A good salary and a safe office get you to zero, to neutral. They don't get you into the positive territory of real deep fulfillment. That is so counterintuitive because our whole culture tells us the opposite. The bigger paycheck is the prize. That's what we're supposed to chase.
And that is precisely the trap. True, lasting satisfaction, the stuff in the positive column, that only comes from what he called motivators.
Oh, okay, so what are motivators?
These are things that are intrinsic to the work itself. Challenging work, getting recognition for an achievement, having real responsibility, opportunities to learn and grow, and this is the big one, doing work that you feel is meaningful.
So you can have a high-paying, high-status job with great hygiene, but if the work itself is empty, you'll still feel unfulfilled.
Totally empty. And on the flip side, you could have a job with just okay hygiene factors, but if the work is deeply meaningful and you're growing, you can be incredibly satisfied.
Let me push back on that a little bit, though. Because for a lot of people, especially those HBS grads you mentioned, they're coming out with 6 figures of student debt. They've got mortgages. In that situation, doesn't that massive salary, that hygiene factor, become a primary motivator?
That's a fantastic and really important question. And yes, you absolutely need enough money to take the unhappiness of financial stress off the table. But the danger, the trap, is when you start making choices, primarily to increase that hygiene factor, way past the point of necessity.
That's the HBS trap you talked about. They took those high-paying consulting or banking jobs right out of school, and the justification was always the same. I'll just do this for a couple of years, pay off my loans, save for a down payment, and then I'll go do what I'm really passionate about. A very deliberate, sensible-sounding plan.
But life gets in the way. They pay off the loans, but by then their lifestyle has completely inflated to match that high salary.
The bigger house, the expensive car, the private school for the kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now that high-paying job isn't a temporary thing anymore. It's the engine they need just to maintain this new, more expensive life. They're stuck. They might even hate the job, but they can't afford to leave to pursue something more meaningful.
The golden cage.
That's it. They got trapped by affluence, all because they chose a job based on the wrong criteria. They mistook the hygiene factor, the money, for the motivator, which is meaningful work.
But what about those jobs where money really seems to be the point, like a stock trader or a top salesperson?
That's a great nuance. Christensen argues that in those specific cases, the money is serving a different purpose. It's acting as an immediate, objective yardstick of success.
So it's not the money itself. It's the fact that the money proves you were right.
Precisely. The trader is motivated by the challenge of outsmarting the market. The money is just the score. The real motivator is the achievement and the recognition of winning the game.
So the actionable advice here is, when you're looking at a job, you have to look past the salary and the perks. You have to. The real questions are, is this work meaningful to me? Am I going to learn things? Will I be given real responsibility to achieve something? That's what determines if you'll be happy in the long run. And that idea that we so often put our resources in the wrong place, that brings us perfectly to our second big insight. It's about strategy, but for your life. Your strategy is defined by resource allocation, not intent.
Yeah, in business, strategy is almost never this clean, top-down plan. It's messy. Christensen makes this key distinction between a deliberate strategy, that's the official plan, what's in the annual report, and an emergent strategy.
And the emergent strategy is what actually happens on the ground, right? It's the strategy that forms around unexpected problems or opportunities that pop up.
Exactly. And the emergent one is always the one that wins out, because that's where the resources, the money, the time, people's attention actually end up going.
The classic story here is Honda trying to break into the U.S. motorcycle market.
Right. Back in the late 50s. Their deliberate strategy was to go head-to-head with Harley-Davidson. They were going to sell these big, powerful bikes.
And it was a total failure.
A complete disaster. The big bikes were terrible, they were leaking oil, and the team was just burning through cash. But kind of as a side thing, the employees had these little 50cc Super Cub bikes to run errands around LA.
The ones they used back in Japan?
Yeah. And one of the guys, just to blow off some steam, took one up into the hills for fun. And suddenly, people started seeing it and asked him, hey, where can I get one of those little dirt bikes?
So the demand just emerged. It was completely unplanned.
Totally. And the company's real strategy didn't change because of some big meeting in a boardroom. It changed because they started putting resources into selling the little Super Cubs to stop the financial bleeding from the failed big bikes. The strategy followed the resources.
Okay, so let's apply that to our personal lives. Our deliberate strategy might be, my family comes first.
We all say that. But where do our best resources actually go? Where does your best hour of the day go? Where do your sharpest mental energy go?
It usually goes to the thing that's screaming the loudest.
The urgent work problem, the deadline, the email that needs a response right now. Those things give you a quick hit of feeling competent. But relationships, your health, they need quiet, consistent investment long before they become an emergency.
So if I'm consistently giving my best energy to work, then my real emergent strategy is my career comes first, no matter what I tell myself.
That's the causality of it. Christensen himself talked about this. He had to force himself to leave the office at 6 o'clock to play catch with his son.
Even when there was a fascinating problem at work pulling him to stay.
Exactly, because he knew that feeling of solving a tough work problem, as good as it feels, it just pales in comparison to the enduring happiness you can find in intimate relationships. He knew the urgent would always win unless he deliberately allocated his resources to the important.
And this brings us back to that sequencing mistake, this idea that you can focus on career now and family later. The authors connect this to a corporate theory called bad capital. What's that?
So in business, bad capital is when investors demand that a new venture grow really big, really fast. It forces the company down a rigid path before it has a chance to learn and adapt, and it usually kills the venture.
And young professionals put that same pressure on themselves.
They do. They think, my career is a startup. It needs all my attention right now. My family is a mature asset. It can wait.
But relationships aren't like that. They're not a stable asset you can just ignore.
They're the fragile new venture. They need that patient, early, consistent investment to build the bonds of trust. By the time a parent decides to lift their foot off the accelerator 10 years later, the game can be over.
It's like deciding you need shade and then trying to plant a sapling. It's just too late.
There's this tragic story in the book about their neighbor, Steve. He worked relentlessly to build his business to provide for his family. A noble goal.
And he succeeded, financially.
Became very wealthy. But his marriage failed, and he lost the connection with his kids. By the time he had the money and the time, his kids were teenagers who had no interest in spending every other weekend in their dad's empty apartment. He missed the window.
He had the resources, the money, but he had failed to build the processes, the actual relationship, over time.
He missed those thousands of small moments, like language dancing with a young child, just being present, talking with them, building their brain and your bond at the same time. You can't outsource that, and you definitely can't do it 10 years late. That idea of misinvesting your resources, it leads so well into our third takeaway, which is about relationships. It uses another one of Christensen's big ideas, understanding the job to be done. But the job to be done, or JTBD theory, is brilliant. It basically says companies fail when they focus on their product instead of focusing on the job the customer is hiring that product to do. It's about a lack of empathy, really.
And the classic example is the milkshake.
The milkshake, yes. A fast food chain wanted to improve milkshake sales. So they asked customers, how can we make it better? And they got useless feedback. Make it sweeter, thicker, cheaper.
They were focused on the product's attributes.
Exactly. Then they changed the question. They started asking, what job are you hiring this milkshake to do for you? And they found two totally different jobs.
The first one was the early morning commuter.
Right. Someone with a long, boring drive. They hired the milkshake because it was thick and took a long time to drink. It gave him something to do for 20 minutes and kept them from getting hungry before lunch. It was doing the job of make my commute less boring.
And the second job was completely different. It was the dad in the afternoon with his kid.
Yeah. And that dad's job was totally emotional. He'd been saying no to his kid all week, and he just wanted a quick, easy way to say yes and feel like a good dad. He was hiring the milkshake for the job of help me be a nice parent.
But the product was terrible for that job. The dad would be done with his food and get impatient waiting for the kid to finish this super thick shake.
Right. The product was perfectly designed for the commuter's job, which made it terrible for the dad's job. He needed something smaller, quicker. The insight is, you have to understand the user's struggle.
And this translates so directly to our relationships. We so often give our partner what we want to give, not what they actually need.
We give him our version of the best milkshake. There's this great story about a man named Scott. He comes home, his wife Barbara is exhausted, the house is a mess.
So he does what he thinks is helpful. He starts cleaning.
He does the dishes, sorts the mail, starts dinner. A huge act of service. And he expects her to be thrilled, but she's just distant and upset.
Because he assumed her job to be done was help me with chores.
Right. He was giving her what he would have wanted. But when they finally talked, he learned her job was totally different. She didn't need physical help. She needed someone to acknowledge how hard her day was. Or maybe she just needed 30 minutes of quiet time alone.
So his selfless act was totally misplaced. He was proudly cleaning the kitchen while she was just desperate for some mental space.
And there's the paradox. So many unhappy relationships are full of selfless acts, but it's partners giving each other what they would want to receive, not what the other person actually needs.
So how do you get past that?
The authors argue that true commitment comes from sacrifice. Not just finding someone to make you happy, but finding someone whose happiness you are willing to sacrifice for.
It's a shift from being a consumer of happiness to a provider of it.
Exactly. Think about the Marines. Their intense bond doesn't come because boot camp is fun. It comes because they sacrifice their own comfort and ego for the group. In a relationship, that sacrifice, when it's aimed at the real job to be done, is what builds that deep, lasting bond.
Okay, so moving from relationships to parenting, our fourth takeaway is about building capabilities. And the argument is that sometimes, with the best intentions, we actually prevent our kids from developing the skills they need. This comes from another core management theory. Organizations and families, or a type of organization, have three capabilities: resources, processes, and priorities. Resources are the obvious things: money, time, knowledge.
Right. Priorities are the values that guide your choices. But the most important one here is processes. That's how you do things, how you solve problems.
And the authors describe what's happening in many modern families as a parenting Greek tragedy.
It's tragic because it comes from a place of love and abundance. Many successful parents have outsourced all the real work from the home. We don't fix our own cars, mend our own clothes, or grow our own food anymore.
And we fill that empty space with experiences: soccer practice, music lessons, summer camps. We give our kids a ton of resources.
A ton of resources, yes. But we are unintentionally robbing them of the chance to develop processes. They learn how to be a great consumer of experiences, but they never learn how to confront a hard, unexpected problem and figure it out for themselves.
So this gets to the heart of where real self-esteem comes from. It's not from being told you're great all the time. No. True, resilient self-esteem comes from one thing: achieving something important when it's hard to do. If the parent always steps in and solves the hard problem, the child is denied the very thing that builds their confidence. You reminded me of Christensen's story about his mother making him mend his own socks.
It's such a perfect example. He'd rip his jeans or get a hole in his sock, and he'd take it to his mom. And she wouldn't fix it for him. She'd just show him how to use a sewing machine and say, "You figure it out."
And it probably took him forever to do a clumsy job that she could have done in a minute.
Of course. But every time he wore those lumpy, patched-up jeans, he'd look down and think, "I did that. I solved that problem."
Yeah.
That builds a kind of confidence that no amount of praise or resources ever could.
So let's apply this. What do you do when your teenager comes to you Sunday night and says, "Oh no, I have a huge project due tomorrow that I haven't started"?
The gut instinct for every loving parent is to jump in and rescue them. Stay up all night, help them do it, maybe even do it for them.
You want to save them from the pain of failing.
But in doing that, you're teaching them a terrible lesson. You're teaching them that when they procrastinate, someone else will come along and absorb the consequences. The much harder but more valuable thing to do is to let them face the music.
Let them get the bad grade.
Let them get the bad grade, because that failure is the first lesson in the course on taking responsibility. You're letting them develop the process of accountability.
And all of this ties into building a family culture.
It does. A family's culture is just the set of priorities and processes that get repeated over and over until they become automatic. It's what your kids do when you're not there to tell them what to do.
It brings up that old philosophical puzzle, the ship of Theseus. If you replace every single plank on a ship, Is it still the same ship? And the parenting version of that is, if your children get all their values, their priorities, their problem-solving processes from teachers, coaches, friends, the internet, because you outsourced all the hard work. Whose children are they, really?
It's a chilling question. You risk ceding control over the very structure of who they become. And that question of integrity and structure leads us to the final and maybe the most important takeaway. Staying out of jail by avoiding the marginal cost thinking trap. This goes back to basic economics. In business, it's very common to make decisions based on marginal costs. That means you only look at the cost and revenue of the next thing you do, and you ignore the big, fixed costs you've already paid.
And this way of thinking makes companies want to just keep leveraging what they already have, like Blockbuster.
Blockbuster is the perfect case study. When Netflix came along with mailing DVDs, Blockbuster looked at it and thought, well, the marginal profit on renting one more movie from our existing stores is really high. The marginal cost is basically zero.
But building a whole new mail-order business? That's a huge full cost. It's not worth it for those tiny margins.
Exactly. So they stuck with what they knew. They leveraged their old structure right into bankruptcy because the future demanded a completely new model, and marginal thinking will always make that look too expensive.
Okay, so how does this business theory apply to personal integrity? This is where it gets a little scary.
It applies through just this once thinking. We do it unconsciously. We have a rule for ourselves, a line we won't cross, but then an extenuating circumstance comes up.
And we tell ourselves,
I know I shouldn't do this, but just this once, it's okay. It's necessary. The marginal cost of that one little compromise seems so small. It's just one tiny lie, one small corner to cut.
you're only looking at the cost of that single step, not the full cost of the path you're starting down.
And as Christensen warns, life is just one unending stream of extenuating circumstances. Once you cross that line one time, the boundary is gone. You've now decided that your principles are negotiable.
You think of someone like Nick Leeson, the trader who brought down Barings Bank.
His story started so small, he had one minor trading error. The marginal cost was tiny, just a little lie on some paperwork. But that lie required a bigger lie to cover it up, and then another, until he was committing massive fraud.
And he paid the full cost. His career, his marriage, his freedom.
He did. The universe always makes you pay the full cost in the end. The just this once thinking just suckers you in by making the first step look cheap.
So the lesson here is one of absolute boundaries.
The only way to avoid the terrible consequences of those moral compromises is to never start making them in the first place. It means having 100% integrity 100% of the time, because 98% integrity is the same as zero. That first small step is the one that costs you everything. So as we wrap up, we've covered these three huge areas of life: your career, your relationships, and your integrity. And it feels like the thread connecting all of it is the need for a clear, deliberately chosen purpose.
Absolutely. You can't just let your purpose happen by accident. It has to be designed and managed. The authors say a useful purpose has 3 parts.
The first is the likeness. That's the picture of the person you actually want to become. You have to sketch that out for yourself.
The second is commitment. That's the deep internal decision to actually live up to that likeness, to sacrifice for it. It's what helps you resist all those extenuating circumstances.
And the third is the metric, how you measure your progress. And we so often default to the easy metrics, the summary statistics, how much money you made, what titles you had, the hygiene factors. But those are ultimately hollow. The authors argue the only metric that really matters at the end is the individuals whom you have been able to help, one by one.
Wow.
Yeah. Not how many people, but which specific people. Whose self-esteem did you help build? Whose day did you make a little easier? That's the work that provides the deepest, most lasting happiness.
It's a complete reframing. Stop measuring what you've collected for yourself and start measuring who you've helped become better. It's a powerful call to action to take the time now to figure that out for yourself.
As Christensen said, it's probably the most important thing you'll ever learn. That's today's breakdown. While this discussion cannot replace the book's full text, it can offer a glimpse into its teachings. I hope you found this discussion helpful, and I look forward to sharing more. Let me know what book next you want to discuss.